From a kid with $5,000 in his pocket to the man who convinced hedge funds, banks, and charities to hand him billions without ever asking where it was going, to the moment his own sons walked him into the FBI, this is how Bernie Madoff ran a $65 billion scam for 17 years. And the scariest part isn't that he did it. It's how stupidly simple the whole thing was. 1960. Bernie is 22 years old, working as a lifeguard and installing sprinkler systems. He takes $5,000 he has saved and starts a tiny broker-dealer firm called Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. No inheritance, no Harvard MBA, just a small stake and an idea. And here's the thing, early Madoff was actually kind of a genius. In 1960, stocks got traded by guys shouting on a floor. Slow, expensive, old boys club. Bernie looked at that and said, what if I just computerized it? He became one of the founding forces behind NASDAQ, literally the world's first electronic stock exchange. By the early 1990s, Madoff Securities was handling roughly 15% of all trading volume on the New York Stock Exchange. One firm, 15%. He served as chairman of NASDAQ. The SEC consulted him on market regulations. He was the guy regulators called when they had questions. So, when people later asked, how did everyone trust this guy? That's your answer. He wasn't some random con man. He was Wall Street royalty. The fraud didn't start with billionaires. It started at the Palm Beach Country Club. Exclusive, wealthy, heavily Jewish, and Madoff was plugged right into it. Golf, clubhouse chats, and the pitch would come up almost casually. And here's the beautiful psychological trap. He made it hard to get in. He didn't advertise, he didn't cold call. If you asked directly, he'd say he was full or wave you off. Suddenly, investing with Bernie Madoff wasn't just a financial decision. It was a status signal. You were in. The returns he promised? Consistent, 10 to 12% annually, every year. Bull markets, bear markets, dot-com crash, September 11th, didn't matter. Bernie was up every single year. That should have been the red flag. Here is where most people get Madoff wrong. They think it was some incredibly complex scheme with shell companies, offshore accounts, and quantum algorithms. This is wrong. Nope, it was embarrassingly simple. A Ponzi scheme works like this. You take money from investor A and you promise big returns. When investor A wants their money back, you pay them using money from investor B. You never actually invest anything. You are just moving cash from new pockets to old pockets while skimming off the top. That is the whole trick. Most Ponzi schemes collapse fast because they cannot get new investors quickly enough. What let Madoff run his for 17 years was three things: the strategy he pretended to use, the structure he hid behind, and the culture of trust he cultivated. Madoff claimed to run something called split strike conversion. You buy blue-chip stocks like Coca-Cola, buy put options to protect against drops, and sell call options to generate income. It is a real strategy. Plenty of funds use versions of it. The problem was that Madoff was running it on a scale that was mathematically impossible. At his peak, he claimed to manage around $65 billion. His strategy supposedly focused on S&P 100 stocks. But the entire options market for those stocks, every put and call traded by every participant, was a fraction of what Madoff would have needed. he would have had to own more options contracts than literally existed. Madoff kept the fraud completely separate from his legitimate business. The real trading operation lived on floors 18 through 20 of the Lipstick Building in Midtown Manhattan. Hundreds of employees, real trades, real clients. The fraud lived on the 17th floor. A small team, trusted longtime employees. The man running the day-to-day was Frank DePascali, who had worked for Madoff since he was a teenager out of high school in Queens. DePascali fabricated the trade confirmations and generated the fake account statements. And they looked real. If you bought $10 million of Coca-Cola on March 14th at $43.22, your statement showed exactly that. Except Madoff's team had just looked up what Coca-Cola actually traded at on March 14th after the fact and filled it in retroactively. They were printing fake history. The auditor? A three-person accounting firm called Freeling and Horowitz, operating out of a strip mall. One active partner. David Freeling had been auditing Madoff's books for 17 years and was, himself, a client. He had his own money in the fund. Nobody checked. Because why would you? This was Bernie Madoff. Madoff understood something most fraudsters do not. You do not need to deceive everyone. You just need to get to the gatekeepers. He set up a network of feeder funds, firms that raised money from their own clients and funneled it to Madoff, taking a cut. The biggest was Fairfield Greenwich Group, with roughly $14 billion invested with Madoff, half their entire portfolio. The founders were getting rich collecting fees for the privilege of handing their money to Madoff and doing basically nothing. Zero incentive to look too hard. Banco Santander was in. UniCredit was in. These were sophisticated institutions with their own due diligence teams. How did they all miss it? Social proof. Everyone assumed someone else had already done the work. If the SEC is watching him, and the big banks are in and Santander is in, surely someone has checked the math. Nobody had, and the returns were good. The statements looked right. Asking questions felt impolite, like accusing someone of lying at your own dinner party. September 2008. Lehman Brothers collapses. The global financial system is in free fall, and scared investors do one thing: they want their money back. In a few weeks, Madoff's clients submitted redemption requests totaling roughly $7 billion. He had about $300 million left in his J.P. Morgan account. The game was over. He just didn't announce it yet. Madoff scrambled. He tried to raise new money. He tried to borrow. Nothing worked. The market was in chaos, and nobody was investing in anything. On December 9th, 2008, he told his brother Peter he was finished. The next day, he called his sons, Andrew and Mark, into his apartment and told them the investment advisory business was basically a big lie. His sons did not go to their dad. They did not go to a lawyer to help him structure a surrender. They called their own attorney that night, and their attorney contacted federal prosecutors. The next morning, December 11th, 2008, two FBI agents showed up at Madoff's apartment. They asked if there was an innocent explanation for what he had told his sons. He said, "There is no innocent explanation." 17 years, $65 billion. It ended with a knock on the door. The $65 billion figure includes fictional profits that Madoff's statement showed over the years. The actual cash that went into the fund, real money from real people, was roughly $17 to $20 billion. Irving Picard, the court-appointed trustee, has recovered about $14.7 billion, roughly 70 to 80 cents on the dollar for legitimate claims. Genuinely remarkable for a Ponzi collapse. But for thousands of individuals, retirees, charities, non-profits, the money came years too late, if it came at all. The Elie Wiesel Foundation lost $15.2 million. Wiesel himself lost his personal savings. Hadassah, one of the largest Jewish women's organizations in the world, lost $90 million. Madoff pleaded guilty in March 2009 to 11 federal felonies. The judge sentenced him to 150 years in prison. Not one letter of support arrived, not from a friend, a family member, a colleague. His son Mark committed suicide in 2010, on the second anniversary of his father's arrest. His son Andrew died of cancer in 2014 at 48. Bernie died in federal prison in April 2021, still maintaining that his family knew nothing. Here's the part that should make you genuinely angry. Someone did catch him. Harry Markopolos was a financial analyst from Boston. In 1999, 9 years before the collapse, his employer asked him to reverse engineer Madoff's strategy. It took him 4 hours to determine the returns were mathematically impossible. 4 hours. He submitted a detailed report to the SEC Boston office in 2000, titled, bluntly, "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." The SEC passed. He resubmitted in 2001, and the SEC passed again. In 2005, he submitted a 17-page memo, now one of the most famous documents in financial regulatory history, laying out in exhaustive detail exactly how the fraud worked. He walked the SEC New York office through the math, and he named Madoff explicitly. The SEC opened an informal inquiry, did some interviews, and concluded Madoff was operating legally. Markopolos later said he was in fear for his life. He varied his driving routes. He told the SEC that they needed to go in with subpoenas, not questions, because this man had decades to perfect his cover story. They didn't listen. The deeper lesson here is not that regulators are incompetent. It is about the sociology of authority. When someone is prestigious enough, trusted enough, famous enough, normal skepticism evaporates. SEC investigators were interviewing a former NASDAQ chairman, a living legend. At some subconscious level, the question stopped being whether this was fraud, and instead became how to avoid accusing this important person of fraud. That is the real mechanism. Reputation as armor. Out of roughly 4,800 accounts in Madoff's fund, about 2,100 were net winners, people who took out more cash than they put in. They had been paid with other investors' money, and many of them had no idea. Thousands of people thought they had found the smartest guy in the room. They built retirement plans and college funds and charitable endowments around statements showing 11% annual returns year after year. And the entire time, there was nothing there. Just a room of people on the 17th floor printing fake history. And there you have it. $65 billion. 17 years. Not with complicated technology or international spy networks, but with a fake strategy, a strip mall accountant, and the most powerful force in finance, the assumption that someone else already checked. But if you thought that was audacious, wait until you hear about the man who convinced an entire country he had more gold than Fort Knox, and who nearly took down one of the biggest banks in the world doing it. Click the video right here and subscribe because the next one is even better.